Commander Vextai stood on the bridge of his massive warship and watched the last human city burn on the planet below. The orange flames spread across the surface like hungry monsters eating everything in their path. Smoke rose up through the atmosphere in thick black columns that blocked out the sun. It had taken 3 days of constant bombardment to break through the human defenses. But now it was finally over. The humans had fought like wild animals trapped in a corner. They threw everything they had at the alien fleet above their world. Their primitive nuclear missiles bounced harmlessly off the energy shields that protected the Zephyrian ships. Their railgun stations fired metal slugs that moved faster than sound, but the alien point defense systems destroyed them before they could hit anything important. Even when their military was crushed the human, civilians kept fighting with hunting rifles and improvised explosives. Vextai had to admit he respected their courage, even though he knew they had to die. Humans were too dangerous to let live. They spread across space like a virus, infecting every world they touched. In just 200 years, they had gone from primitive savages throwing rocks at each other to a spacefaring civilization that threatened the peace of the entire galaxy. Their technology advanced too quickly, and their minds worked in ways that made other species uncomfortable. The Galactic Council had debated the human problem for decades before finally reaching their decision. 6 major civilizations had joined together to solve the issue once and for all. The Zephyrians provided the fleet. The Helican Dominion supplied the weapons. The crystal beings from Arcturus gave them the location of every human colony. The insect queens of the Vegan Empire offered their swarm fighters. The energy beings from beyond the rim shared their shield technology. The ancient machine intelligences calculated the most efficient way to eliminate every human in known space. They called it the Great Cleansing, and it had taken exactly 18 months to complete. One by one, every human world had fallen. Mars, with its underground cities, lasted 3 weeks. The mining colonies in the asteroid belt held out for a month. The research stations around Jupiter fought for 2 months before their life support finally failed. Earth itself had been the final battle, and the humans had saved their best defenses for their home world. The human fleet had been impressive for such a young species. Their ships were ugly angular things covered in armor, plating, and bristling with kinetic weapons. They moved like predators hunting in packs, and their crews fought with a ferocity that shocked even veteran alien warriors. But they were outnumbered 50 to 1, and their technology was generations behind what the Galactic Council could field. Vextai remembered the final moments when the human orbital defenses had finally been silenced. The last human admiral had sent a message before his flagship exploded. The alien commander still kept a recording of those final words, even though 50 years had passed since that day. The human had looked directly into the camera with eyes full of hate and said something that still gave Vextai nightmares. The human admiral had smiled a cold, cruel smile and spoken in perfect galactic standard. His voice was calm and steady, like he was discussing the weather instead of watching his species die. He said that humans had a saying about revenge being a dish best served cold. He said that space was very cold and very big. He said that not every human would die today, and someday the survivors would remember what had been done to them. Then he had laughed as his ship broke apart around him. Now, 50 years later, the galaxy was at peace. Children of 6 different species played together in crystal cities that sparkled under alien suns. Trade flowed freely between worlds that had once been enemies. The great universities shared knowledge without fear that some aggressive species would turn that knowledge into weapons. Artists created beautiful works that celebrated the harmony between all thinking beings. The Galactic Council governed with wisdom and compassion. The human home system had been turned into a memorial park. No one was allowed to colonize the dead, worlds, or mine the asteroids. The ruins of human cities were left exactly as they had been found after the bombardment ended. Tour ships brought visitors to see what happened when a species chose violence over cooperation. School children learned about the dangers of unchecked aggression by walking through the empty streets of New York and London and Tokyo. But deep in the shadows between the planets where sensors could not reach, something else was happening. In caves carved into asteroids and bunkers buried under miles of ice, small groups of humans had survived the Great Cleansing. They had gone into hiding before the alien fleets arrived. They had sealed themselves in cryptogenic pods and waited for the danger to pass. They had built automated systems to keep them alive while they slept through the decades of alien occupation. Dr. Kate Phillips felt the warm liquid draining away from her body as the cryptogenic pod opened for the first time in 50 years. Her muscles were weak and her lungs burned as they filled with recycled air, but she was alive. Around her in the dim blue light of the underground facility, other pods were opening. Men and women who had been her colleagues and friends before the long sleep were stirring back to consciousness. The hidden base called Haven's End had been built inside a hollowed-out asteroid in the shadow of Jupiter's great red spot. The location had been chosen carefully to avoid detection by alien sensors. For 50 years, automated factories had been busy following programs written by human engineers. They had built things that would have seemed impossible before the war. They had prepared for the day when humanity would wake up and reclaim what had been taken from them. Captain Jake Morrison was already awake and waiting when Kate pulled herself out of her pod. The grizzled old soldier looked exactly the same as he had 50 years ago, thanks to the cryptogenic process. His eyes were still sharp, and his voice still carried the authority that had made him a legend during the war. He helped Kate to her feet and handed her a cup of hot coffee that tasted better than anything she remembered from before the long sleep. Morrison explained what had happened while they slept. The base's artificial intelligence had been monitoring alien communications and mapping their territories. Automated mining ships had been harvesting resources from the outer planets. Robot factories had been building a fleet of warships using technology that combined human engineering with equipment salvaged from destroyed alien vessels. Most importantly, they had discovered something about human biology that the aliens had never suspected. The neural pathways in human brains were different from every other known species. This difference made humans immune to the psychic attacks that most advanced civilizations used in warfare. The aliens had won the first war through superior numbers and technology, but they had never understood what made humans truly dangerous. Now humanity would have a chance to show them what they had really awakened when they tried to destroy an entire species. Kate looked around at the other survivors, who were gathering in the main chamber of the base. There were only 300 people left from a species that had once numbered in the billions. But each of them carried 50 years of rage in their hearts. Each of them remembered the friends and family who had died in the Great Cleansing. Each of them was ready to make the aliens pay for what they had done. Outside the base, automated systems were already moving the first human warship toward the edge of the solar system. Soon it would be time to remind the galaxy that humanity was not as extinct as everyone believed. Commander Lisa Hayes pressed her hand against the cold metal wall of the underground facility and felt the vibrations from the massive machines working 3 levels below. Titan Base had been carved deep into the frozen surface of Saturn's largest moon during the first desperate years after the Great Cleansing. The base stretched for miles through the ice, connecting workshops and laboratories and living quarters for the 2,000 humans who called this place home. Lisa had been just a teenager when the alien fleets came to destroy humanity. She remembered hiding in the evacuation tunnels under Luna City while the orbital bombardment turned the surface into molten glass. Her parents had pushed her into a cryptogenic pod with tears streaming down their faces. They had kissed her goodbye and promised they would see each other again someday. That was the last time she ever saw them. Now she was 30 years old in body, but her mind carried 50 years of memories from the automated teaching systems that had educated her during the long sleep. She knew 17 different languages, including every major alien dialect. She could design weapon systems that would have been impossible before the war. She could pilot spacecraft that moved faster than anything the enemy had ever seen. Most importantly, she understood exactly what needed to be done to make the aliens pay for their crimes. The weapons laboratory occupied the entire 4th level of Titan Base. Human engineers worked alongside artificial intelligence systems to create devices that would give their species an advantage in the coming war. The aliens had won the first conflict through superior numbers and advanced energy weapons. This time, humanity would fight differently using tools that played to their unique strengths. Engineer Danny Torres looked up from his workbench, where he was assembling the guidance system for a new type of missile. The device in his hands was smaller than a coffee cup, but it contained enough processing power to track and destroy an entire alien fleet. The warhead it would guide carried nanomachines that could eat through any known type of armor plating. Once these weapons reached their targets, nothing in the galaxy would be able to stop them. Danny had spent his entire adult life working in the hidden shipyards of Europa Station. The facility had been built inside the ice shell that covered Jupiter's 4th largest moon. Automated mining equipment carved out vast chambers where human workers assembled spacecraft using materials harvested from the outer planets. The ships they built looked nothing like the vessels that had fought in the First War. The new human fleet was designed around a simple philosophy that Danny had learned from studying the defeat of his species. Aliens relied on energy shields and plasma weapons and elegant designs that looked beautiful but wasted resources on unnecessary decorations. Human ships would be ugly and brutal and efficient. They would carry kinetic weapons that could punch through any defense. They would have thick armor that could absorb massive amounts of damage. They would be built to kill aliens, and nothing else mattered. Captain Bobby Chun stood in the command center of the flagship New Earth's Revenge and watched his crew run through their final training exercises. The massive dreadnought was 3 kilometers long and bristled with weapons that could crack a planet in half. Its hull was made from metamaterials that could absorb energy blasts and redirect the power to the ship's own weapon systems. Its engines used controlled gravity fields to achieve speeds that violated everything aliens thought they knew about physics. Bobby had been the youngest admiral in human history before the great cleansing destroyed his fleet above Mars. He remembered watching his ships explode one by one as alien energy beams carved through their hulls like hot knives through butter. He had been forced to abandon his flagship in an escape pod and watch helplessly as the enemy finished off his surviving crews. The memory of that defeat burned in his chest like acid every day for 50 years. Now he commanded a vessel that could have destroyed his entire original fleet without taking a scratch. The humans who served under him were no longer the same species that had been driven to extinction. Genetic modifications and neural implants had turned them into something faster and stronger and smarter than baseline humanity had ever been. Their reaction times were measured in microseconds. Their accuracy with weapons approached mathematical perfection. Their ability to coordinate complex operations made them function like parts of a single organism. Dr. Amy Rodriguez had made the discovery that would change everything. Her research into human neurology had revealed something that no alien scientist had ever suspected. The structure of human brains included pathways that existed in no other known species. These pathways made humans naturally resistant to psychic attacks and mental manipulation. More importantly, they could be enhanced through technology to give human crews incredible advantages in combat situations. Amy stood in her laboratory on Ceres Station, looking at brain scans from volunteers who had received the new neural implants. The devices were microscopic machines that integrated with human nervous systems to boost cognitive function and sensory processing. A pilot with these implants could track hundreds of targets simultaneously, while calculating firing solutions that would have required a supercomputer before the war. A gunner could adjust for gravitational distortion and enemy movement patterns faster than any alien could think. But the most important discovery was how the implants affected human emotions. The devices didn't make people less human or turn them into emotionless machines. Instead, they focused human feelings and channeled them into pure determination. Rage became tactical thinking. Grief became strategic planning. Love for fallen friends and family became an unbreakable commitment to victory. The hidden colonies had been in contact with each other throughout the 50 years of exile. Quantum communication devices allowed instant coordination across thousands of light years. Each facility had developed different specializations based on available resources and the skills of their populations. Titan Base created weapons. Europa Station built ships. Ceres Station developed technology. Ganymede Base trained pilots. Enceladus Outpost monitored alien communications. 23 separate colonies were scattered across the outer rim of known space. Some were hidden in asteroid fields where sensors couldn't detect them. Others were buried under the ice of frozen moons. A few had been built inside the cores of dead planets where they would be invisible to alien scanning technology. Each one had spent decades preparing for the day when humanity would reveal itself to the galaxy again. Doc Captain Morrison's voice echoed through the communication systems connecting all the hidden bases. His words were simple and direct, but they carried the weight of 50 years of planning and preparation. The time for hiding was over. The aliens had grown soft and complacent during their decades of peace. They had forgotten that humans existed, and that made them vulnerable. The first phase of the plan was already in motion. Scout ships were moving toward the edges of alien territory to gather intelligence and identify targets. The enemy would soon learn that the species they thought they had destroyed had become something far more dangerous than they could imagine. Humanity had returned, and they had brought weapons that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy forever. Captain Zixstar adjusted his position in the command chair of the Zephyrian merchant vessel Peaceful Endeavor and watched the stars drift past on the main display screen. The cargo run to the Centauri drift was routine work that his crew had completed hundreds of times before. They carried manufactured goods from the core worlds to the frontier colonies and brought back rare minerals and exotic materials. It was honest, profitable work that helped bind the galaxy together in peaceful cooperation. The ship's sensor officer was a young Zephyrian named Kevron, who had graduated from the academy just 2 years earlier. His pale blue skin showed the nervous color patterns that indicated excitement as he studied the readings on his console. 3 unknown contacts had appeared at the edge of sensor range, moving on an intercept course with the merchant convoy. Their energy signatures didn't match anything in the galactic database of known vessel types. Zixstar felt a flutter of concern in his chest, but pushed the emotion away. Pirates occasionally operated in this region of space, but they usually targeted single ships rather than attacking entire convoys. The Peaceful Endeavor was traveling with 4 other merchant vessels and 2 escort cruisers from the Galactic Patrol. Any bandit group foolish enough to attack such a well-defended formation would quickly find themselves outgunned and outnumbered. The unknown ships continued to approach at a steady pace that suggested confidence rather than caution. Their hulls were dark metallic surfaces that absorbed sensor beams instead of reflecting them back to the merchant vessels. Strange angular projections covered their surfaces like the spines of some predatory creature. Most disturbing of all was their complete silence on all communication frequencies as if they were ghosts drifting through the void. Commander Sam Parker stood on the bridge of the human destroyer Retribution and watched the alien convoy grow, larger on his tactical display. The enemy ships were exactly where intelligence reports had said they would be. Their formation was loose and undisciplined. Their escort vessels carried weapons that had been designed for show rather than serious combat. Most importantly, their crews had no idea that death was approaching them at half the speed of light. Sam had volunteered for this mission because he needed to see alien blood spilled with his own eyes. His wife and children had died during the bombardment of Luna City 50 years ago. He had been away on a deep space mission when the attack began, and by the time he returned there was nothing left but radioactive ash. The cryptogenic sleep had preserved his body, but his dreams were still filled with memories of the family he would never see again. The Retribution was one of 12 human warships that had been assigned to Operation First Strike. Their mission was simple and brutal. They would attack alien shipping in remote areas and demonstrate that humanity had returned to settle old scores. Every enemy vessel they destroyed would send a message throughout the galaxy. Every alien crew they captured would carry word back to their governments that the species they thought extinct was very much alive. The human fleet had spent weeks studying alien tactics and psychology. The enemy relied heavily on psychic warfare techniques that could disable entire crews through mental attacks. Their weapons were designed to look impressive and intimidating rather than being maximally effective. Their ship designs prioritized comfort and beauty over armor and firepower. Most importantly, they had grown soft during 50 years of peace without any serious military threats. Zixstar felt his throat tighten as the lead unknown vessel transmitted a message in perfect galactic standard. The voice that came through the communication system was calm and professional, but it carried undertones that made his skin crawl with primitive fear. The speaker identified himself as Commander Sam Parker of the human vessel Retribution and demanded immediate surrender. The alien captain almost laughed at the impossibility of what he was hearing. Humans were extinct. Everyone in the galaxy knew that simple fact. The great cleansing had been thorough and complete. No human had been seen alive for 50 years. This had to be some kind of elaborate hoax, or perhaps a terrorist group using stolen technology to impersonate the dead species. But when the human ships opened fire, there was no mistaking the brutal efficiency of their weapons. Kinetic projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed punched through the energy shields of the escort cruisers like they were made of tissue paper. The alien vessels had been designed to fight other civilized opponents who used plasma beams and particle weapons. They had no defense against solid metal slugs that carried the kinetic energy of small nuclear bombs. The first escort cruiser exploded in a ball of superheated gas before its crew even realized they were under attack. The second managed to return fire, but its energy beams scattered harmlessly off the angular armor plating of the human destroyer. Within 30 seconds, both military vessels had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and radiation. Lieutenant Rachel Martinez led the boarding party that assaulted the merchant vessels after their drives and weapons had been disabled by precisely targeted shots. The human Marines wore powered armor that made them look like metal monsters as they cut through the alien hulls with plasma torches. Their enhanced reflexes allowed them to move faster than the enemy could track, while their neural implants coordinated their actions with mechanical precision. The alien crews tried to resist, but their efforts were pathetic compared to human military efficiency. Zephyrian security officers carried energy weapons that were designed more for ceremony than combat. Their training emphasized negotiation and peaceful resolution rather than violent confrontation. When faced with armored humans who moved like deadly machines, they surrendered within minutes. Rachel dragged Captain Zixstar to the communication console of his own ship and forced him to record a message at gunpoint. The alien's voice shook with terror as he spoke the words she dictated. To him, he announced that humanity had returned from extinction, seeking vengeance against those who had wronged them. He warned that no alien vessel would be safe in the regions of space that humans considered their rightful territory. The message was transmitted on all emergency frequencies throughout the local sector. Within hours, it would reach the communication networks that connected every civilized world in the galaxy. The news would spread like wildfire through populations that had grown comfortable in their belief that the human threat had been eliminated. Forever. Sam Parker watched the alien prisoners being loaded onto transport shuttles that would carry them to the edge of the system before releasing them. As survivors would return to their home worlds with stories of the day they met humanity's children. They would describe weapons that violated galactic conventions and warriors who fought without mercy or hesitation. Most importantly, they would carry the warning that this was only the beginning. The human fleet disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind only wreckage and radiation. But their message had been delivered with perfect clarity. Humanity had returned, and they remembered every injustice that had been done to them. The galaxy would soon learn what 50 years of hatred could accomplish when it was focused into pure determination for revenge. The crystalline chambers of the Galactic Council had never echoed with such angry voices before this day. Representatives from 6 major civilizations sat around the curved table where they had once celebrated the extinction of humanity 50 years ago. Now those same beings argued and shouted accusations at each other, while emergency reports flooded in from across known space. The impossible had happened, and none of them knew how to respond. Admiral Kethva of the Zephyrian Navy stood before the assembled delegates with his uniform wrinkled and his normally perfect composure cracked by exhaustion and fear. He had not slept for 3 days since the first human attack, and his report painted a picture that made even the most powerful beings in the galaxy feel small and helpless. 37 alien vessels had been destroyed or captured and coordinated. Strikes across 12 different star systems. The attacks followed patterns that violated everything the galactic military understood about civilized warfare. Human forces targeted supply convoys rather than fighting honorable battles between military fleets. They struck communication relays and destroyed sensor stations that had no strategic value except to spread terror. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to have detailed intelligence on the personal histories of alien officers who had participated in the Great Cleansing 50 years. Commander Velinash of the Helican Dominion had been killed when human marines boarded his cruiser near the Vega system. The aliens found his body in his private quarters with a datapad displaying his service record from the war against humanity. Someone had highlighted every battle where he had commanded ships that bombarded human colonies. The message was clear and terrifying in its implications. Counselor Yithron of the Helican Dominion slammed his crystalline fist against the table, hard enough to crack the ancient stone surface. His species had contributed the most advanced weapons to the Great Cleansing, and now he demanded immediate action against the human terrorists. But his voice carried undertones of fear that everyone in the chamber could detect. The Helicans were energy beings who relied on psychic attacks to disable their enemies. If humans were truly immune to mental warfare, then his people were defenseless. The Council's military advisors presented holographic displays showing captured human technology that made the assembled delegates gasp in shock and disbelief. Human ships moved faster than anything in the galactic database. Their weapons fired solid projectiles that could punch through energy shields like paper. They used nuclear devices and kinetic weapons that had been banned by civilized species for centuries. Most terrifying was something the humans called nanite swarm missiles. These weapons released clouds of microscopic machines that could eat through hull armor and disable ship systems within minutes. The nanites were programmed to target specific materials and energy signatures. They could be designed to attack only alien technology, while leaving human equipment completely untouched. No defense existed against such weapons because no civilized species had ever been barbaric enough to develop them. General Patricia Stone had become a name that haunted the dreams of alien military commanders throughout the galaxy. Her human forces had captured the Zephyrian Memorial Station that had been built above the ruins of Earth as a monument to their victory in the Great Cleansing. The aliens had expected the humans to destroy the facility in a rage of vengeance, but instead they had converted it into a fortress and broadcast center from humanity's scarred homeworld. The human general transmitted recordings that made alien civilians weep with guilt and terror. The broadcast showed footage from the original war, including scenes of alien fleets bombarding human cities and refugee ships. Children's voices could be heard screaming as their schools were destroyed by energy beams. Medical facilities filled with wounded civilians were shown exploding under alien bombardment. But the most effective propaganda came from interviews with human survivors who had lived through the Great Cleansing. These men and women spoke calmly about watching their families die while alien crews celebrated their victories. They described hiding in underground shelters while the surface world burned above them. They explained how they had spent 50 years planning their return and preparing to settle accounts with those who had wronged them. Broadcasts reached every inhabited world in the galaxy through communication networks that the aliens themselves had built. Parents tried to shield their children from the images, but the recordings played on public screens and emergency channels that could not be blocked. For the first time since the Great Cleansing ended, alien populations were forced to confront what had really been done in their names. Intelligence reports from across the galaxy painted an even more frightening picture of human capabilities. The terrorist attacks were not desperate strikes by a few survivors with stolen ships. Intercepted communications suggested that dozens of hidden human colonies existed throughout unexplored space. Each facility was coordinating with the others to plan attacks that would maximize psychological impact on alien populations. The humans had spent 50 years studying their enemies and learning from their defeat. They understood alien psychology better than most aliens understood themselves. They knew which targets would cause the most fear and which tactics would be most effective at spreading panic. They had turned their exile into an advantage by using the time to prepare for a war unlike anything the galaxy had ever experienced. Counselor Zeftai of the ancient machine intelligences processed data streams from across known space and calculated probabilities that made his circuits burn with electronic fear. The humans were not fighting a conventional military campaign. They were conducting a systematic campaign of psychological warfare designed to undermine the foundations of galactic civilization itself. The attacks targeted specific individuals rather than random victims. Every alien officer who had served in the Great Cleansing was now marked for death, regardless of their current position or location. Human assassins were hunting down war criminals and executing them with weapons that left no evidence except corpses. The message was simple and terrifying. Humanity remembered everything, and no one who had participated in their near extinction would be allowed to live. The Galactic Council faced a choice that none of them had imagined when they ordered the destruction of humanity 50 years ago. They could try to negotiate with the human survivors and offer some form of compensation for the genocide they had committed. Or they could mobilize their combined fleets for another war of extermination and hope that this time they could finish what they had started. Admiral Keffa looked around the chamber at the faces of beings who had once seemed all-powerful and invincible. Now they looked like frightened children who had awakened something terrible from its sleep. The humans were no longer the primitive species that had been defeated in the First War. 50 years of exile had forged them into something that could challenge the established order of galactic power. The decision was made without a formal vote. Every species represented in the council chamber reached the same conclusion through their own reasoning. Humanity could not be allowed to exist. The threat they represented to galactic peace was too great to ignore. Orders went out to every military commander in known space. The largest fleet in galactic history would assemble at the Kepler defense line to crush the human uprising once and for all. But as the delegates filed out of the chamber to prepare for war, none of them noticed the small listening device that had been placed under the council table. Human intelligence was already one step ahead of their plans, and General Patricia Stone smiled as she listened to their deliberations from her command center above the ruins of Earth. The Kepler defense line stretched across 3 light years of space, like a wall of metal and energy designed to protect the core worlds of galactic civilization. Admiral Kethva stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching thousands of alien vessels take their positions in the massive formation. Ships from 6 different species moved in perfect coordination as they prepared to face the human threat once and for all. 3,000 vessels had answered the call to defend the galaxy from the returning menace of humanity. Zephyrian battlecruisers, with their elegant curved hulls and powerful energy weapons, formed the center of the line. Helican energy ships that looked like crystalline spiders floated in perfect geometric patterns. The insect swarms of the vegan empire buzzed around the larger vessels like angry hornets protecting their nest. Ancient machine intelligences had contributed automated defense platforms that bristled with weapon systems controlled by artificial minds that could process targeting data faster than any biological crew. Crystal beings from Arcturus provided shields that could absorb massive amounts of energy and redirect it back at attackers. The energy entities from beyond the rim offered their most advanced technology to ensure that humanity would be crushed completely this time. Admiral Kethva felt confident as he reviewed the tactical displays showing his overwhelming numerical advantage. The humans had perhaps 200 ships based on intelligence estimates, even if their technology was superior to what the galaxy had seen before. They would be outnumbered 15-1. No force in the history of space warfare had ever overcome such impossible odds. But deep in his heart, the alien commander felt a cold fear that he could not shake. The humans had already proven they could think and fight in ways that defied galactic understanding. Their attacks had been perfectly coordinated across vast distances. Their intelligence network seemed to know things that should have been impossible for them to discover. Most disturbing of all was their complete immunity to the psychic warfare that formed the backbone of alien military doctrine. The human fleet that emerged from hyperspace near the edge of the Kepler system looked like nothing the galaxy had ever seen before. 200 vessels approached the alien defense line in perfect formation, but each ship was a masterpiece of military engineering that radiated deadly purpose. Their dark hulls absorbed sensor beams instead of reflecting them. Strange geometric projections covered their surfaces like the spines of predatory creatures. Admiral Kelly Wright stood on the bridge of her flagship Terra's Vengeance and watched the alien fleet grow larger on her tactical displays. The massive dreadnought stretched 3 kilometers from bow to stern and carried enough firepower to crack a small moon in half. Its armor was made from metamaterials that could absorb energy attacks and convert them into power for the ship's own weapons. Its engines used controlled gravity fields to achieve impossible speeds and maneuverability. Kelly had been a junior officer aboard a destroyer when the Great Cleansing began 50 years ago. She remembered watching her captain die as alien energy beams carved through the bridge around them. She had been forced to take command of the damaged ship and lead the survivors in a desperate fighting retreat that saved 300 human lives. The memory of that day had burned in her mind through 50 years of cryptogenic sleep. Now, she commanded a fleet that could have conquered the entire galaxy during the First War. The humans who served under her were no longer the same species. That had been driven to near extinction. Genetic modifications and neural implants had enhanced their natural abilities to superhuman levels. Their reaction times were measured in microseconds. Their accuracy with weapons approached mathematical perfection. Their coordination in battle made them function like parts of a single deadly organism. The battle began exactly as Admiral HFY had planned, with a coordinated psychic assault designed to disable the human crews through massive mental overload. Every alien species contributed their most powerful psychic warriors to the attack. Energy beings from beyond the rim focused their consciousness into beams of pure mental force. Crystal entities from Arcturus channeled planetary energies through their crystalline matrices. Even the machine intelligences added electronic warfare programs designed to disrupt biological neural patterns. The psychic assault washed over the human fleet like a wave breaking against a cliff face. Not a single human crew member even flinched. As alien mental powers shattered harmlessly against their enhanced neural defenses, Admiral Wright felt the attack as nothing more than a gentle breeze across her consciousness. Her crew continued their preparations for battle without pause or hesitation. The alien commanders stared at their instruments in shock and disbelief as their most powerful weapons produced no effect whatsoever. For the first time in galactic history, an entire species had proven completely immune to psychic warfare. The foundation of alien military superiority had crumbled in an instant, leaving them vulnerable to enemies they had never imagined could exist. Human ships accelerated into the alien formation with impossible speed and agility. Their gravitic drives allowed maneuvers that violated the basic laws of physics as most species understood them. Captain Nick Sullivan's cruiser squadron punched through the alien center line like bullets fired from a rifle. Commander Beth Turner's destroyers swept around the flanks, firing relativistic projectiles that struck with the force of nuclear explosions. The alien formation began to collapse within minutes as human weapons tore through their defenses with contemptuous ease. Ships that had dominated space for centuries found themselves outgunned and outmaneuvered by an enemy they had thought primitive and extinct. Energy shields that could stop plasma beams and particle weapons offered no protection against solid metal projectiles traveling at significant fractions of light speed. Admiral HFY watched his beautiful flagship die around him as human boarding. Parties cut through the hull with plasma torches and stormed through the corridors with weapons blazing. His bridge exploded in showers of sparks and debris as armored human marines crashed through the blast doors. His last transmission before the communication system failed was a single word that summed up the impossible situation. He whispered impossible into his headset as human hands dragged him from his command chair. The battle that was supposed to crush humanity once and for all lasted less than 4 hours. When the fighting ended, the debris field stretched across half the star system. Thousands of alien vessels had been destroyed or captured, while the human fleet had lost only 7 ships to enemy action. The largest military force ever assembled in galactic history had been shattered by 200 human warships that fought like demons unleashed from hell. Admiral Wright stood in the captured command center of the alien flagship, looking out at the wreckage of enemy dreams and ambitions. Around her, human crews worked efficiently to salvage useful technology, while rescue ships collected alien survivors. The humans were not monsters, despite what their enemies claimed. They followed strict military codes and treated prisoners according to the laws of war, but the message was clear to every species that had participated in the Great Cleansing 50 years ago. Humanity had returned as something far more dangerous than the primitive civilization that had been defeated in the First War. They had evolved beyond their original limitations and become the galaxy's ultimate predators. The peace that alien species had enjoyed was over forever, Admiral Wright activated the communication system to broadcast across all galactic frequencies. Her voice was calm and professional, but it carried undertones of absolute certainty that made alien listeners shiver with primitive fear. She reminded the galaxy that humans had once offered partnership and cooperation. The aliens had chosen to respond with genocide and extinction. Now they would learn what humanity became when given 50 years to prepare for war. This battle was only the beginning of a reckoning that would reshape the balance of power throughout known space. In the darkness between the stars, more human fleets were already moving toward their next targets. Humanity had returned, and they had brought vengeance with them that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come.